All right, welcome everybody. I hope everybody's had a great week. We were just saying, can't believe that we're almost into March. So before we introduce our awesome partners from UW Athletics, I do want to say that March 1st, the month of March is National Nutrition Month. And so I know that some of you have participated in the 90-day challenge for increasing your fruits and vegetables. I know sometimes a lot of people feel like that's, on repeat constant, but that is our theme for National Nutrition Month, is increasing our fruits and vegetables. So I encourage you to sign up for National Nutrition Month. We will have, we will have really great articles from our dietitians from Harborview and UWMC are contributing some articles in March that you'll be able to see. We're going to create an online social opportunity for people that sign up for National Nutrition Month, just to encourage each other. We go through our day. Sometimes it's really hard to, unfortunately, we open up the fridge and our fruits and vegetables are starting to dwindle, right? So we have all the intentions, but to hold yourself accountable and be part of a challenge sometimes can kind of keep that motivation going to form that habit. So you can see National Nutrition Month on our events page. And then also in March, we will have our third seminar, and we are inviting a dietitian from UW Recreation, their nutrition peer program. UW Recreation actually offers consultations now for if you wanted a nutrition consult. So that's pretty awesome. So Ivory is going to be our guest in March. We're thinking March 26th. So I'll send out the link for that. And without further ado, I know we do this on all of our events and seminars. We want to thank our sponsors. The whole U has an opportunity to grow, and that's because we have sponsorship. So thank you, AT&T, for supporting all 600 events that we do every year. So we really appreciate our sponsors. And now I'd like to introduce Kennedy Springer. I will spotlight you, and Meredith Price. And they are our dietitians from UW Athletics, who also led the group in January. And again, we appreciate you leading us again in February. So without further ado, I will remove myself and mute myself. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. And I'm just going to present our PowerPoint. Super excited to be back. And today's theme is a little bit more focused on kind of what Kennedy and I do on a day-to-day basis with the population that we work with. So we work with our student athletes down in the athletic department. And, we titled this presentation, Fueling Your Body to Perform for Movement, Work, and Life. We totally understand that, most people on this call are probably not elite level athletes, and that's okay. Fueling is important, not just for our athletes, but it applies to everyone. And so general movement, work, we need to make sure that we're fueling for cognition and life. So all the things that we want to do. So our presentation today will go over our basic macronutrients. We always start with those just to make sure we all have a good understanding of what those do for our body. Highlight whole grains and fiber, nutrition and cognition. So just kind of how fueling helps your brain, breakfast, pre and post exercise nutrition, sleep, and then some key takeaways to take home. We understand that, everyone on this call has different desires to move and exercise and perform. And so we want to know, how does performance nutrition relate to you? I think the question in our poll actually says, what is your favorite way to be physically active? But, we just want to know the type of people that are on this call, like what types of things do you like to do to move your body when you can, when you're able to? So I'll give everyone a few seconds to answer this question. Lots of variety. This is great. Give everyone a little bit more time. You can select more than one as well if you need to or want to. Awesome. I think we've got most everyone who's going to answer the question in. So I'll go ahead and, so close. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. So it looks like walking is one of our favorite ways to be physically active. And that's wonderful. I love walking myself. And looks like we do a lot of weight training, some running. I think everything was pretty much hit here. Definitely some yoga work. Even just like moving around the house, hiking. Probably not too many swimmers because it's hard to in Seattle, but kudos to all of you who do that. So, I think the point of this poll is to just show, how many different types of ways there are to move. And there was another category too of things that I didn't even think of. And so, performance nutrition is a spectrum. And so, it goes all the way from, needing fuel and energy to perform for work and daily life and cognition, your brain. At the other end of the spectrum, this is, important brain and body fuel for elite athletes where training is their full-time job. And all of this, everything that falls in between there is performance nutrition, is sports nutrition, but needs are a little bit different. So what we're hoping today is that, you can kind of take some of these points away and apply them to you based on how you like to move and how you like to exercise. Kennedy, I'll pass it off to you.
Perfect. So as Meredith said, we're going to highlight the 3 macronutrients, which are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And these are big nutrients to think about because they are the nutrients that provide our body energy, and they can fuel our performance through the energy they provide. So we'll first dive into carbohydrates. Okay, so I love the very first 2 points here with carbohydrates. The first one, the brain's preferred source of energy and the best source of fuel for exercise. So just how Meredith highlighted that spectrum of performance, we can have the cognitive function on one end all the way up to elite athletes. And wherever you fall on the spectrum, carbohydrates are going to be important because you're going to need to fuel your brain, provide the energy source for your brain, as well as for exercise and any form of movement that you're doing. So no matter where you fall, carbohydrates are important. And so when we think about carbohydrates, they are actually stored in our body as glycogen. And the 2 main storage sites are in our muscle and in our liver. So as we're thinking about our carbohydrates and as we're thinking about movement and exercise throughout the day, we're going to tap into these stores. We're going to pull that stored carbohydrate in the form of glycogen to use during our exercise. And another thing to really think about with carbohydrates, it's one of the nutrients that's really going to change depending on our training intensity and our weight goals. And so going back to that spectrum again, depending on where you are at the spectrum is how much carbohydrate and what you're consuming is going to depend on. So when we think about lower intensity, maybe it's an off day, maybe you don't have a lot of high intensity activity going on that day, you're going to burn just a little bit less energy, and you're going to need to use less of that glycogen storage. So you're not going to need to restore as much carbohydrate. So maybe your intake is a little bit lower on those days. Whereas if we're thinking of really high intensity, really long training days, maybe you went for a really long hike and used a lot of energy, you're burning more energy, you're going through more carbohydrate, you're using up those glycogen stores, and we really need to think about replenishing and topping them off. So our intake's going to be higher on those days. So carbohydrate really just can vary day to day. It's always going to be an important nutrient to consume, but it is directly correlated to our intensity of training and how much energy we're burning. Okay, so now getting into carbohydrate and cognition and the function. So when we think about our brain, it's really interesting because the brain is only about 2% of our total body weight, but it's one of the highest energy consuming organs in the body. And so just take a minute and think of all the functions that the brain has. It's important for almost everything you do on a daily basis, from things as reading, thinking, even down to the movement and the neurotransmitters and how the brain helps your body move. And maybe even things you aren't thinking about, like simple processes such as breathing or maintaining your body's temperature. The brain plays a function in all of those. And so it's really important to make sure our brain has the energy that it needs to perform these functions. So the primary source of fuel that the brain is going to need is glucose, which is a form of carbohydrate. And so even when we're low on our glucose, the brain can use ketones, but it's not going to be its preferred source. So we really need to make sure that we're eating enough carbohydrates to provide that glucose for the brain. And you can see there further down on the page that as those glucose levels fall, it's so important for the brain to have glucose that the body actually has mechanisms to compensate for low blood glucose levels. So that's when we come back to those carbohydrate stores in the form of glycogen. We can utilize those so that the brain gets the energy it needs. Or sometimes our body can also make glucose from other compounds within our body so that the brain can have the energy it needs. And the type of the carbohydrate is going to be important as well. So thinking about the type of carbohydrates we'll dive into in the next couple of slides. But when we want to optimize our brain function and our brain health, we really want to focus on complex carbohydrates rather than refined carbohydrates. They can really help improve our focus and our function cognition throughout the day. And so one thing that we really like to think about with carbohydrates and cognition is kind of comparing it to our athletes here. One really good example is our coxswains on the rowing team. So if you think about a rowing boat, you have your people that are on the oar, they're making the boat move, but then another really important person on the team is the coxswain. So they're sitting in the boat and they are not exerting a ton of energy as far as rowing and making the boat move, but they are using their brain to strategize and help their team win. And so their key function in the boat is really important to the team succeeding. And they might not be utilizing their muscles as much as the other athletes in the boat, but they are utilizing their brain. And so that's when we really think about the carbohydrates and cognition. That can be really important for our brain function as a coxswain. And the same applies to our day-to-day tasks. Maybe it's work, maybe it's school, maybe it's learning and educating, but anything that you're doing day to day, your brain is going to require carbohydrates. And so wherever you are, once again, on that spectrum, carbohydrates are going to be really important for your brain function and cognition. Okay, so this slide really highlights what I was talking about on the last point there, where we want to focus on complex carbohydrates. So when we think about complex versus simple carbohydrates, neither are good or bad. Complex carbohydrates have a few more nutrients. They might be a little bit more nutrition, but we're going to utilize both of them at different times. So when we think about the complex carbohydrates, these are more of our whole grains, and they're going to be higher in fiber. So when carbohydrates are higher in fiber, it's going to take a little bit longer for the body to break them down. Therefore, we're going to have increased satiety. And so what we wanted to do is provide you some of the sources of complex carbohydrates, and you can kind of go through that list, but thinking of our whole grain breads or pastas, crackers, cereals, ancient grains, quinoa, buckwheat, brown rice, we can really utilize any of these carbohydrates as a complex source. Looking into beans and lentils and our legumes, oats and oats bran, wheat germ, and even fruits, thinking of berries, apples, melons, dates, bananas, oranges, potatoes, and going through that list, just kind of highlighting some of the complex carbohydrates. We can also get them from vegetables and non-starchy or starchy. So those are more complex. They're going to provide satiety. They're going to have a few more nutrients, going to have that fiber. And then we also have simple carbohydrates. So the simple carbohydrates are going to be more of our simple sugars. And this carbohydrate has minimal or no fiber. So since they have minimal or no fiber, we digest them fairly quickly, unlike the complex carbohydrates. So they're going to digest quickly, provide quick energy, and a little less of that satiety. And you can see here again, some of the sources of the refined carbohydrates are going to be our refined breads, pastas, and tortillas, a lot of our snack foods. Our fruit and vegetable juices fall into our simple carbohydrate category. Honey, agave, maple sugar, and just other sweeteners. And then really thinking about sugary cereals or sugary bars and our pastry, candies, and desserts. So this is a couple examples of some of the simple versus complex carbohydrates and the different ways that they're digested and utilized in the body.
So, complex carbohydrates, like Kennedy said, provide many nutrients and health benefits. I think that's something that we really want to point out is that, as dietitians, we're definitely going to be promoting eating more whole grains and complex carbohydrates in our diet. But we also want to address that simple carbohydrates are not inherently bad. And so I think a lot of food labeling occurs where we have foods that are labeled good and bad, and that's just not the case. And so those simple carbohydrates can fit in the diet. They should fit in the diet, but we're gonna, promote a little bit more complex carbohydrate intake. So, what is a whole grain anyway? I love this picture just because I think it shows it really well, and we throw out that term whole grain, and it's kind of like, what does that really mean? But there's many different parts to a grain, and so from the bran, the germ, the endosperm, and the hull. And when a grain is refined, that means a lot of these components are actually removed from it. And when it is not refined or it is a whole grain, we're actually getting, all of these parts of the grain. And so you can see, in the bran, which is something that is removed when a carbohydrate is refined, you're missing out on those antioxidants, phytonutrients, some minerals, B vitamins, and fiber. And as well as other like healthy fats and different vitamins like vitamin E. The endosperm is actually what remains when we do refine a carbohydrate. So that's where we get the starch from. There's a little bit of protein and there's a little bit of B vitamins. But we think about a whole grain, and what we mean is that we're eating all of this, we're getting all of this. And so there's actually nearly 24 edible grains. I didn't know what the total was, but it's almost 24. So lots of options to choose from. I think, quinoa is definitely one that people throw out a lot, and quinoa is great, but there's so many other choices too, if that's not one of your favorites. And a lot of these are pretty simple to make, generally just require water and some herbs and spices, bring to a boil, reduce to a simmer for a different amount of cooking time. Candy.
Perfect. So now getting into the fiber aspect that we have highlighted, I'm just going to give a little bit of education on what fiber is. So fiber is the plant-based nutrient that cannot be completely broken down into digestible sugar molecules as it goes through your intestinal tract. So because of these properties, and since our body isn't breaking it down as it goes through the GI tract, it's going to aid in digestion. It's going to help keep us regular with our bowel movements. It's going to help us regulate our blood sugar as well as regulate and maintain cholesterol balance. So when we think about fiber, there are actually two different types of fiber. So the first type is a soluble fiber, and this one behaves by dissolving in water and becoming a gel-like substance. And so when we think back to those fiber functions, the soluble is really going to help with regulating our blood sugar. The sugar isn't going to enter the bloodstream as quickly because it's in that gel-like substance. And then when we think about the insoluble fiber, it's actually going to maintain its structure as it passes through the GI tract. It doesn't create that gel-like substance. So this functions more in maintaining our bowel regularity as well as preventing constipation. So both forms are really important, and they both serve a little bit different of a function. So we provided some foods high in fiber here: lentils, fruit, berries, legumes and beans, vegetables, bran cereal, oatmeal. And you'll see that a lot of those sources come back to those complex carbohydrates that have a little bit more fiber in them. And when we think about the soluble and insoluble, a lot of foods are going to have both sources in them. Some are going to be higher concentrated in one versus the other, but a lot of these that are listed will actually provide you the soluble and insoluble sources. When we're thinking about intake on a daily basis, the guideline is women to consume 25 grams a day, and for men to think about 35 grams of fiber per day. And really, when we think about this nationwide, it's vastly underconsumed. We aren't hitting these levels of the 25 grams and the 35 grams per day. So fiber can be a really important nutrient that we can increase in our diet to have some of these fiber function benefits and really get those sources of carbohydrates. Okay, so now we're going to jump into our second macronutrient, which is protein. So once again, wherever you are on the spectrum of performance nutrition, protein is going to be a really important nutrient to consume. So protein is made up of amino acids, and it helps to build and repair our muscle tissue. So when you think about, a couple of you indicated that you like to lift weights, protein can be important to help you build and repair your muscles from that. It's also going to be really critical to initiate that muscle protein synthesis. So being able to put together those proteins to build up your muscles again. And think that most of us associate protein with our muscles, but it also serves a lot of other functions. So it's really important to think about the other functions of protein. It can be a component of enzymes, it helps with our hormones, it serves roles in our bone health, in our hair, and in our nails. So kind of when you think about day-to-day life, protein is going to serve a function for a lot of different things. So when we think about our protein intake throughout the day, we really want to think about spacing it out. We really want to optimize on having it multiple times a day throughout the day rather than consuming it all in one sitting. So kind of thinking as your goal, trying to aim towards having a source of protein at each meal or snack. Sometimes we have dinner and it's really heavy on protein, but maybe our breakfast might be a little bit low. So maybe a takeaway from today is to optimize it throughout the day. How can you add some protein to your breakfast? How can you add it to your lunches and your snack meals? So we provided some sources here. We obviously, probably the first thing that comes to mind is animal sources of protein. It's going to be our meat, our fish, our eggs, and our dairy. But we also can get protein from plants. So legumes, beans, lentils, nuts, soy products also contain protein. So we have two different sources that we can get it from. Then getting deeper into our sources, sometimes we think about lean proteins and proteins that have a little bit higher fat content. So I won't read through all of these, but as a resource for you, on the left-hand side, we have our leaner sources of protein, thinking about our chicken breasts and thighs, lean ground beef, grilled fish, cottage cheese, our plant-based source of tofu, eggs and yogurt, and soy products, whey and casein protein, as well as beans and lentils. On the right-hand side, we have our protein with a little bit higher fat content. So this is when we think more of our fast food or fried things. So our fried foods, chicken, fish, hamburgers, ground beef that is less than 85%, bacon, salami, pepperoni, sausage, ribs, nuts and nut butters can have a little bit higher fat content. And so similar to carbohydrates, when we emphasize complex versus simple carbohydrates, neither are inherently good or bad. They just provide different nutrients and we utilize them at different times. So when we're really thinking about exercise and physical activity, the protein with the higher fat content takes a little bit longer to digest. Therefore, sometimes it's not the best thing to consume right before working out. And so we want to think about the timing of our protein intake. Maybe if it's before working out, we're focusing on the leaner sources, whereas those higher fat content might not be as well tolerated right before a workout.
Awesome. And I'm going to wrap up the macronutrients with talking about fats. So fat is our energy source at rest and at low intensity exercise. They make up the membrane of our cells. So if you go back to 7th grade biology, talking about the phospholipid bilayer, right? So fatty acids actually make up the membrane of our cells. And one thing that I think is really fascinating is that depending on what types of fats we're actually eating, they interchange along our cells' phospholipid bilayer. So the more healthful fats that we're eating actually insert themselves and make our cells overall healthier. And when we have a diet that's consumed of less healthy fats, those are the ones that are actually surrounding our cells. So pretty fascinating. They're critical for brain health as well, and they make up over 60% of our brain. The best sources are unsaturated fats, and those are typically liquid at room temperature. And that includes both mono and poly unsaturated fats. And the list is short but powerful, right? So we've got avocados, nuts of all kinds, seeds of all kinds, olive oil, olives, vegetable oils of many kinds, and then cold water fatty fish kind of wrap up where we're finding those unsaturated fats. And so, one specific unsaturated fat that we want to highlight are omega-3s. They are very popular right now, just kind of talking about them. And so, we have athletes that we're recommending, increasing their omega-3 intake, and they don't know what we're talking about. They don't know what they do for the body. So just wanted to make sure everyone here understands that omega-3s are an essential unsaturated fat. And essential means that our bodies can't produce it. We have to get it from dietary sources. And they are an integral part of our cell membranes throughout the body, and they affect this function of the cell receptors in these membranes. They're the starting point for making hormones that regulate blood clotting, contraction, and relaxation of artery walls, and inflammation. And so the two kind of most known and popular, I guess, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but omega-3s are EPA and DHA, and I'm not going to say those because I'll butcher the names, but they're 20 and 22 carbon chains long, and those are found in fatty fish like salmon, albacore, tuna, swordfish, mussels, and oysters, and those come from the very, very bottom of the food chain. The smallest amount of fish, or the smallest size fish eating a little bit of algae, is essentially where it comes, and then those fish eat bigger or eat smaller fish, bigger fish eat them, etc. And then we have these big salmons, big albacore tunas containing a lot of these omega-3s. There's also ALA, which is a plant-based source of omega-3s, and that includes foods like walnuts, hemp, flax, some wild greens, and meat if it's raised grass-fed, because they're eating those wild greens. Unfortunately, our body does not do a really great job of converting ALA to EPA and DHA, and EPA and DHA are the two that we really need for critical brain function. And so it is true that if you do have a primarily plant-based diet, your body does adapt and converts ALA a little bit better. But if you're kind of, mixing and matching, the conversion rate is quite low. It can actually be under 1%. And so, fish is a really important part of our diet, and obviously there's some people that are allergic to fish or can't eat fish, but for the most part we recommend having fish in the diet so that we get those really good sources of omega-3 fatty acids. So covered the macronutrients, took a little bit of a dive into fiber, took a little bit of a dive into omega-3s and whole grains. And so we want to switch gears a little bit and talk about nutrition surrounding performance. And again, performance can mean several different things. As we saw from our poll, we've got people on here that are walking, we've got people on here that are cycling, hiking. All of these things require energy. And so the recommendations that we have on here are typically recommendations that we talk with our athletes about, but we've kind of modified them to better suit this population. Kennedy, I'll let you take it away from here.
Okay, so first things we're going to talk about pre-exercise nutrition, and we'll go through during and after as well, but we got to start with the baseline of our pre-exercise. And like Meredith said, just depends. Everyone answered something different for the activity that you enjoy doing. And maybe it's really intense activity that we're emphasizing our nutrition before, or maybe it's thinking about my work day. You're still going to need energy to get through work and to perform the functions at work. So even that becomes your pre-nutrition, or your pre-exercise or pre-work nutrition. So the very first bullet point there that I really want to emphasize is eating a meal or snack before working out or before starting your day. Really no benefit to the fasting, and we'll dive into that a little bit more throughout the presentation. But starting the day, starting the workout with some nutrition beforehand. So what we really want to do is think about the timing of our intake of the food. So we really want to be energized throughout our workout and make sure that we've given our body enough nutrients to perform, but we also want to prevent overloading our stomach, putting too much in our stomach right before we're about to go do a really extensive workout. So the general guidelines that we use are 3 to 4 hours before exercising, we're going to have a full meal. So we can think about having carbohydrates, protein, and fats, all three of those macronutrients that we talked about, as well as fruits and vegetables. That timeline, the 3 to 4 hours, gives your body time to digest it, and you're ready to go when it's time for your workout. If we're thinking 1 to 2 hours before, maybe it's a morning workout, we aren't waking up 3 to 4 hours before, we're thinking of eating a small meal or a snack, really emphasizing the protein and the carbohydrates in that meal or snack. A little bit less time, so we don't want to consume as much food right before we start that workout. Or the third option is we can top off with something really small, just a small snack right before beginning the workout. So we'll perform better if we have something in our stomach. So maybe it's just getting a quick little snack before you start that workout. And you'll notice that I emphasize the 1 to 2 hours before. I said thinking of proteins and carbohydrates. And this goes back to the category of fat, where it takes a little bit longer to digest. So the closer we are to the workout, the less fat we want in our meal. So we're having a little bit less of those sources, focusing more on our proteins and our carbohydrates to help perform our best and feel our best during our workout. Okay, so now we're getting into the point that I made at the very first. Should I eat before my early morning workout? So very first, the fasted cardio has been pretty popular in the media lately. And it's kind of based off of the belief that you'll burn more fat and therefore you'll lose fat if you do your workouts fasted than if you were eating before your workout. And so really want to provide some education here that fat burning or fat oxidation is not the same as losing body fat. So overall, when we think about losing body fat, it comes down to a balance between our fat storage and our fat burning. And research is really showing that there is no difference in fat loss between fasted cardio and fed cardio. So kind of combating that belief that we need to do fasted cardio to burn off of our fat and lose our fat stores. So that bullet point there with the yes is kind of our big highlight and importance here is we recommend having a snack before an early morning workout, especially if your workout is going to be high intensity. You're going to really need that food and that fuel to get you through that workout. Or maybe you find yourself hungry during your workout. You kind of get halfway through and you can start to feel your hunger and you aren't fueled as well as you could have been for your workout. Or the third one is getting dizzy or you can't complete the workout as well. So thinking of those things, if you fall into those categories and you haven't been eating before your early morning workout, it might be a good idea to think of small little snacks that you could get in right before that workout so that your body is fueled and ready to perform. So the very last point there, it really can be something small. You don't have to make it a huge meal. It doesn't have to be really complex. So some really easy examples is fruit and nut butter or a piece of toast with some nut butter on there. Yogurt can be really great. It's a good combination of carbohydrate and fat, or granola or a protein bar. So you can see those are simple little things that you can grab really quickly, and it can help you for that early morning workout to be fueled and to make it through your workout and perform your best. And then also getting into breakfast. So if you think about the word breakfast, it literally means breaking the fast when we break it down. So thinking about going to bed at night, you're sleeping through the whole night and we're depleting the stores. So thinking back to those carbohydrate glycogen stores, we're depleting that overnight and we're starting the day with low stores. So that's kind of thinking about breakfast where it becomes really important is breaking that fast, getting us energized and fueled for the day. Eating the breakfast can fill you up and get you ready. And then it provides some other benefits as well. So thinking back to our brain, it's going to fuel the brain. You're going to have better cognitive function, whether it's in your workout or whether it's your work day. And then it's going to provide that energy you need that your body requires to perform its best. So when we're thinking about our breakfast, we really want to think about containing some carbohydrate and a source of protein. So I provided a couple examples here, some simple things with our carbohydrates, getting a whole wheat bread or a whole wheat cereal. Maybe it's fruit, maybe you love fruit and that's how you're going to get your carbohydrates in the morning at breakfast. Oatmeal, yogurt, and then thinking of our protein as well. Eggs, Greek yogurt is going to have a high content of protein, milk or nut butters. So once again, they can be really simple things. Sometimes breakfast seems like the hardest meal because you're on the go, but most of the things that we've highlighted are things that you can grab really quickly and you can prepare quickly and be fueled for your day.
So during exercise nutrition, again, we just want to highlight that everyone's physical activity is different. Typically during your workout, you probably won't need fuel unless it approaches 60 to 90 minutes of continuous higher intensity exercise. Thinking long runs, cycles, weight training sessions, being in the PNW, long day hikes or half day hikes or something. This is when you definitely want to be fueling during your workout. And, as we've been saying throughout the presentation, carbohydrates are the best source of fuel for exercise. And so, we're thinking of quick digesting carbohydrates during a workout as it's necessary. For everyone, water intake is definitely important. You definitely want to sip water throughout your activity if you can. Continuous sipping is better than pre-workout chugging water. It actually makes you a little bit more hydrated to sip it throughout the activity. Nutrition product companies market products that you need to improve your workouts, and these are often endorsed by celebrities and influencers. We'll dive into supplements in a little bit, but just a lot of products out there that are recommended, and we'll see people show up to the gym with their pre-workout, their intra-workout, their post-workout, all of these just bottles and pills and tablets and powders. And so usually that stuff is not necessary for most people. But I think the post-exercise nutrition is really, really important for everyone on this call. And so after exercise, the muscle cells are like sponges. They're ready to soak up all of the nutrients. Consume a meal or snack 1 to 2 hours after exercising, regardless of what you did. We recommend eating every few hours throughout the day for most people anyway, and so this kind of fits in there. And what you need can adjust based on the intensity of the exercise. So with our athletes, we like to give this kind of window of time where we like to have them recover. And the reason that we put a time window on it, and we actually say within like 30 to 60 minutes, is because we find that if we push it closer to that 2-hour mark, it ends up being 3 hours or longer. And so, if you're going to the gym or you're at home or you're going on a hike, making sure that within an hour or so, you're able to have something to nourish your body with. And the best things that we can nourish our body with after workout and after training are our 2 favorite macronutrients in the sense of exercise, and that's protein to help rebuild that muscle tissue, and carbohydrates because we need to restore the glycogen that we burned and used throughout our exercise. Adding in fruits and vegetables to meet your nutrient needs. So while that might not be critical right away, as part of a balanced meal a few hours after exercise, that's a great component of it. And what you don't need is supplement after supplement after supplement. So supplements, do you really need them? I just put a couple of kind of trendy terms that are kind of on the mainstream right now. And I thought this was fascinating. The supplement industry is expected to be worth $230 billion by 2027. Right now, it's estimated to be worth about $60 billion. So it's just going to keep going up and up and up. And there's a lot of words that are thrown out there: immune boosting, natural, detox, fat burning. And then these are all typically to either shred the pounds, lose the weight, don't age, or put on a ton of muscle. And the point on the previous slide saying a lot of these are endorsed by celebrities and influencers is true. And just because someone is using it, all it means is that they were paid to use the product and say it works. It does not necessarily mean that the product works. And so as sports dietitians in our department, we firmly believe that whole foods come first, and supplements are a conversation that we have with our athletes after we nail down the diet. Sometimes supplements are very important for people, especially if they're missing key micronutrients, if they have key micronutrient deficiencies, or it just doesn't make sense to get something from a whole food. And I'll dive into that in a second. But $230 billion, so spend wisely. I think a lot of the supplements that are kind of out there right now that I at least see are, detox mixes or teas, powders, acclaimed fat burners. And what I think everyone should know and is not really widely common knowledge is that none of these products are regulated by the FDA. Kennedy and I could meet out in the hallway. We could create a supplement, package it up, and sell it. And we could write whatever we want to on the label. And there's not really many people that are going to come check to see if it's true. And so a lot of these supplements are often contaminated. They're not accurate. The efficacy is poor. So just know that, these products can be great. There's some amazing supplement companies out there, but a lot of them are not. And so if, when we look for a supplement for our athletes that need them, we are looking for third-party certification. And what that means is that someone else besides the company that made them came in, did analysis of their products, and concluded that the product label is accurate. And these will have labels on them. So it will say that they've been third-party tested. So we actually don't give our athletes any supplements that are not third-party tested. The main reason for that is because the NCAA requires that. It's a rule. But for you and your families and your friends, we just want to make sure that everyone knows that supplements are not critical to anyone's diet. They're just supplemental. A lot of them are just, high doses of water-soluble vitamins that you won't likely absorb anyway. And much more reasonable amounts of these vitamins can be obtained via diet in ways that you actually absorb and utilize. We highlighted a couple that we feel like are worth bringing up. A lot of people ask about protein powder, and protein powder generally is a pretty low risk supplement as far as contamination goes, especially when the only ingredients are, the protein and maybe some sweetener. Once it starts adding a bunch of extracts and herbal accessories, we kind of, pump the brakes a bit. But sometimes it is a convenient option to increase your protein intake. And, I definitely sometimes recommend adding a little bit of protein powder to your breakfast in the morning, whether it's oats or yogurt or a smoothie, if protein is really difficult for you to obtain. However, it's important to know that you can easily meet your protein needs through food intake. And most, if not all Americans, well, not all, but most Americans do meet their protein needs throughout the day because we do consume a lot of meat. So a population that might need some assistance with protein is someone who's kind of eating more of a plant-based diet, specifically a vegan diet. Vitamins and minerals, eating a variety of foods as well as fruits and vegetables can meet your daily vitamin needs. There are a couple of supplements that we do recommend considering. A maintenance dose of vitamin D, and that's because of our location in the world and in the United States. The sun is not at the appropriate angle in the winter to allow for vitamin D synthesis via the skin, and that's our number one source. It's very hard to get vitamin D in the diet without taking a supplement. Some sources are dairy products, eggs, a little bit of fish, and then I can't remember the word right now. It's like sun-bathed mushrooms, but not many people are eating those. So we do recommend a maintenance dose of vitamin D for about 2,000 international units. And if you're someone who is not eating about 2 portions of fish per week, a fish oil supplement can be really helpful to get those omega-3s in. Sometimes 2 portions of fish is really easy for people and they're getting that or a little bit more, and other times it's really difficult. Fish can be more expensive than other protein sources. And so a fish oil supplement can be helpful if you're plant-based, and algae oil supplement can also be very helpful. And then any micronutrient that you're deficient in from laboratory tests. So if you have a deficiency in iron or B12, yes, it's very, very important that you take those supplements. And so, really the takeaway here is that eating a varied and balanced diet will get you the micronutrients you need. And oftentimes we see clients, patients, athletes coming to us with all of these supplements, and then we kind of go through their dietary intake with them, and by just swapping in some foods or really dialing in that nutrition, they don't need any of those supplements. And for your wallet's sake, I think that's really important, because supplements are very expensive, and ultimately the diet industry is the ones that are profiting off of this. Kennedy, this is yours. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good. Okay, so another thing that usually gets brought up too is snacking. We went through the pre, during, and the post exercise, and a lot of my athletes ask, like, what about snacking? So I think it's important to highlight snacking, and the fact that you can consume snacks to optimize your performance. So wherever you are on the spectrum, snacks can be really crucial to optimizing your performance. And in our athletes, we utilize them frequently so that they can perform better. And I really want to make sure to get the point across that you can eat snacks throughout the day and still meet your fitness or your weight loss goals. And we really just want to think about the activities that we're doing throughout the day, and what are we doing to perform, and what are the nutrients we're providing our body to have that performance. And so I think snacking can be really important, and an easy way to make sure we're fueled to best perform. So I provided a couple examples here. I won't go through all of them, but as you can see, we really highlighted getting in some carbohydrate and some protein. A couple of them also have some fat, depending on when you're going to intake the snack. But really easy ones, the yogurt with berries and granola, having a whole grain muffin. You could add some nut butters as well for increased protein. Thinking about pita chips or bread with hummus and carrots. Thinking clear to the bottom, try dates stuffed with a nut butter, shredded coconut, and dipped in melted chocolate. So a lot of variety of things that we can do with our snacking, but just allowing yourself to have snacks throughout the day, because they can be important to keep you satisfied and also fuel your performance, but you can still hit your fitness goals and your weight loss goals while snacking. So this is just a really simple slide that goes over the 3 R's to recovery. And there are things that we have somewhat talked about throughout the presentation, but rehydrate, we want to make sure we're consuming enough fluids. So when you think about activity, a lot of times we're sweating, we're breathing harder, our body is losing fluids. And so we want to make sure we're rehydrating. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about hydrating in the next few slides. Refuel, we really hit on that today as well. And then thinking about recharging. So when we say recharge, it's time for our body to sleep. It's a time for it to rest and recover so that we are ready to go the next day or to the next time that we're performing. Okay, so just diving into hydration a little bit more. I really like this graphic on the screen here because it shows some of the important things that water does in the body, or that fluid does throughout the body. And so really thinking about all of those functions helps us realize how important hydration is, whether it's lubricating our joints, carrying nutrients and oxygens to the cells, maintaining or moistening our tissues, helping dissolve minerals and make nutrients accessible in the body. And really thinking about the burden on the kidneys and the liver as well. And up at the top, thinking about regulating our body temperatures. So those are some of the key things that hydration and fluids in the body are doing. So I also think it's important to highlight the signs of dehydration so that you can recognize when you're not giving your body the fluids it needs. And some of these are probably very common, that you've heard of them, you know the signs of dehydration, but I just wanted to put them here so that you have a reference, thinking about fatigue, thirst, dizziness, headaches. Sometimes looking at the color of your urine can be a pretty good indicator of how well you're hydrating. Dry mouth, even irritability can be a symptom of dehydration, and loss of skin elasticity. So that just highlights some functions as well as some of the things you'll see when you are dehydrated. So then the next question we usually get is, okay, I know hydration is important, but how much fluid do I need every single day? So in general, our guideline is drinking half of your body weight in ounces of fluids every single day. That's kind of a maintenance dose, day in and day out. If we're getting about that much, we are probably hitting our hydration needs. And what that comes down to is an estimation of about 3 liters for females, 4 liters for males. So if you put that into cups, which might be a little more common for us, is 12 cups for females, 16 cups for males. So those are 2 general guidelines that you can use on the day-to-day basis. And then as you're thinking about hydrating for your exercise, before you want to make sure you're hydrated. And if you're doing half your body weight in ounces every day, hitting those 3 to 4 liters, hopefully you're entering your workout hydrated. And we're thinking about during, as Meredith said, clear back at the first of the presentation, having frequent sips throughout your workout. Not only can be refreshing and a nice little break from your workout, but it can keep you hydrated throughout as well. And then after, the more you sweat, the more that you're working hard and you are losing those fluids, the more you're going to need to replace. So those are just some general guidelines that can get you through your normal day, but also through a workout. And then the other point on there was recharge, which we talked about sleep a little bit, and it's going to be key to recovery as well. So broke it down into 4 different pillars here. The amount of sleep, we really want to aim to get 7 to 10 hours of sleep every night. It's not only going to improve your energy levels, but it's going to help you have a more productive day, have better workouts, because your body receives the proper amount of sleep that it requires. Another thing is consistency. So our bodies in general, they love consistency. They love to kind of have a routine with things. And so striving to go to bed at the same time every night and waking up at the same time every morning. If you think about your life, weekdays, this can be kind of easy. And then you think about the weekend and maybe your sleep is thrown off. So just keeping that in mind, can you do a little bit better job keeping your consistency all 7 days of the week? And then a nighttime routine can be really important as well. When we think about going to bed, we want to get really good quality sleep. And some things that can help with that are a good nighttime routine. And I feel like media has kind of highlighted the effects of blue light screens, whether it's electronics, our computers, our TVs. But if we can put those away an hour before bed and allow ourselves to relax and do different activities such as reading or stretching that prepare us to get the best quality sleep. And then the last thing that I wanted to highlight with sleep is naps. So if you have time, naps can be really beneficial. And the timing of naps can be important too. Research is showing that the optimal time for your sleep cycle is to do a power nap of about 20 minutes or a nap of about 90 minutes. So if you have the time in your day, it can be really beneficial to utilize naps as well to recover and energize yourself.
Thanks, Kennedy. Love napping. Although it's hard to do for sure. So the key takeaways, and I was looking at the chat while Kennedy was talking, and we've got some awesome questions on there that I want to make sure to address. So, we believe eating a variety of foods each day is going to get your body what it needs. Shifting away from a diet and moving towards a balanced lifestyle is key. And I think all of you in this 90-day challenge, and I'm not sure if that has ended or not, or if it's soon to be ended, but, if you can commit to something for 90 days, it kind of does create part of your lifestyle and these habits that are long lasting. Recognizing that what works for someone may not work for you, and there isn't anything wrong with that. That may be a specific, intermittent fasting, keto diet, whatever it is. Not everything's going to work for everyone. Start fueling your day first thing in the morning with breakfast, drink fluids throughout the day and stay hydrated, staying on track with consistent meals and snacks, trying to eat every 3 to 4 hours. A nighttime routine really helps create healthy sleep habits, and this looks different for everyone, but just the routine piece of it is the most important. Eating more whole grains, fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, and unsaturated fats. They are shown to be the most critical components of a healthful diet. And so we have some time for questions, and there's our contact information on there. But yes, we will have the slides after. And I wanted to address a couple that I saw specifically about fiber. So someone asked, why do men need so much more fiber? Is it unhealthy for women to get closer to 35? That's a great question. And the fiber intake is really, that recommendation is based on calorie intake. So the general assumption is that men typically eat more calories than women do. That's not necessarily always true. And so the more calories you eat, the more fiber it's recommending, because it's kind of like a percentage of your diet. So the basic answer is no, absolutely not unhealthy for women to get closer to 35. The only time when excess fiber intake becomes a problem is if it's causing uncomfortable bloating, bowel movements, like excessive bowel movements. So one example I often say is like, I knew someone who would just eat like bowls and bowls of raw cabbage. And yes, her fiber intake was quite high, but she felt horrible all day and was extremely bloated. And that's because cabbage, as well as other cruciferous vegetables, are very gassy vegetables. And she didn't feel so great. So sometimes, sacrificing a little bit of fiber for some easier to digest options is a good thing. And then, I think this answer should address the question about intermittent fasting. And I think someone else asked about gluten-free diets, I think. Yeah, so I hope this question answers, or this answer, I hope my answer answers both of those questions. I think nutrition is a very confusing topic. Like, there are people that claim that they know about nutrition. There are dietitians that promote all sorts of different things. And it's like, how are you as the consumer with a normal amount of nutrition knowledge supposed to know what to do if everyone's telling you different things? And it's really frustrating, and we get frustrated about it too. And I think the biggest takeaway is like, if intermittent fasting works for you, that's awesome. If it doesn't, that's awesome. Like, whatever is sustainable and long-term for you is what's going to be most beneficial. So if you find, what we sometimes hear is like, keto is the only way I can lose weight. Like, I do it, I've done it 5 or 6 times. And it's like, well, maybe that's not sustainable if you have to keep restarting keto, right? Because it sounds like that's not how the weight loss is staying off. And so gluten-free, there's no reason to not eat gluten unless you do have a gluten intolerance or a gluten allergy like celiac. We don't necessarily need to eat gluten, but there's nothing wrong with it and there's nothing bad about it. So with intermittent fasting, ketosis, gluten-free, anything else that you think of, like, just knowing that, if it works for you, great. If not, that's okay. And it's probably going to work for, 10 to 20% of people and not many more. And just with the protein requirement, grams per day, the general recommendation is about, and I think I said this in the last presentation, everything that we do is in grams per kilogram, which is kind of confusing, but it's about 1 gram per kilogram of body weight per day. And so, typically, what is that, Kennedy? Like half of your body weight in pounds in grams of protein is a good starting point. If you are someone who is aiming for weight loss, or you're aiming to build muscle, you consider yourself, moving frequently throughout the day, you're doing some strength training, even endurance athletes too, a little bit more protein can be very helpful, closer to like 1.5 grams per kilogram of your body weight per day. So protein drinks was another question that was asked, and that can definitely be helpful. Should be after the workout probably, and not beforehand. We just don't need to load up on protein beforehand, but after, the combination of protein and carbohydrates is critical for muscle recovery and glycogen replenishment. And so you want to be sure that you're getting that protein and carbohydrate in. If it's a drink, great. If it's a meal, great. And then, I know I'm doing a lot of talking really fast right now. And then I think the last thing I just wanted to say was, this question, smoothies versus whole foods. I get encouraged to do smoothies rather than eat a breakfast. Smoothies are totally fine if you're able to kind of condense your smoothie or your ingredients of your smoothie into what would have been like a full satisfying meal. So we believe that smoothies are better than juices. Smoothies, you're actually able to keep the fiber, and that's kind of what's giving you that satiety and longer lasting energy. And, you know, if it's just a fruit smoothie, you know, you don't have much protein in there, if any, you're not getting much fats. And so you're really losing those other components of satiety. And so, you know, maybe your smoothie has other ingredients in it that would make it a little bit more of a meal. But if liquid is easier to digest or feels more comfortable, liquid's totally fine. So I think I'll probably stop right there. And there's a lot of questions we didn't get to, but I think, you know, if you do have questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Meredith. Thank you, Kennedy, for leading this incredibly informative discussion. I learned so much, and I think you actually got through a lot of the questions. And we totally appreciate your time. Thank you. Looking forward to the next session. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.